Now, get ready to talk hockey. Streaming from the Oilers Live Studio. Subscribe or follow today.
Oh, already a glitch. We're here. All right. Hey. It's Michael from Oilers Live. Back on the air after an extended summer break that included Olympics, Europe, all sorts of different things, but happy to be back. Got lots of Oilers news to talk about. As my guest tonight, I've got Ryan Lotsberg from the Heavy Hockey Network, one of our senior writers. In fact, seemingly the only guy writing articles lately. He's just been pounding them out lately. Thanks for joining. We're going to talk a little bit about Oilers hockey. Yeah, it's good to have you. Jeez, I mean, I haven't talked Oilers hockey to anybody that knows hockey for a long time.
We haven't had a show in a minute here, so yeah, it's been a while.
It has been. It's been far too long, and I joke about that, but as an Oilers fan outside of Edmonton, right? It's a rarity that I find people that actually understand Oilers hockey. And I mean that with some degree of respect, but it's, it would be like having the two of us on a Leafs show to talk about the Leafs in great detail, right?
Right.
We just don't watch enough of them, right? We don't know all of the prospects. We don't know all of the different things that are going on around the team, right? And that's the challenge that I have on a day-to-day basis. People, get their information out here in the East from, Eastern NHL media, which I've always been very critical about when it comes to Oilers hockey. And so I say it and I mean it. Like, it's hard to talk legitimate hockey with folks here about the Oilers. Of course, maybe you have the same same experience in Edmonton.
I was just thinking that, there are some people that I know that are like really into hockey and can talk on the same level as I can, because I'm like, I know I can tell you what every guy on the team makes. I can tell you all the prospects, right? Like I know all these stuff, and I have friends who are at that level as well. But like, if I meet somebody in the street and we're casually talking Oilers, it's very surface level. So like, it's probably very similar to what you would get out in Halifax.
Yeah. And I guess that's fair, right? Like, we surround ourselves at the Heavy Hockey Network with guys and women that, enjoy and watch hockey on a regular basis, right? And so you kind of get used to that on occasion. I'm not gonna. I guarantee you, there's a few people watching right now, and about 80% of them probably don't think I know anything about hockey. And they might be.
I said about me.
Yeah. But you can have some intelligent hockey conversations. Anyway, all of that to say is I'm happy to be back here talking with you, Lotsy, about some hockey, and we've got something to talk about. I mean, it's middle of August. It wasn't that long ago, though. We were talking about Stanley Cup finals and how that shook out, and then free agency and how that shook out.
Feels like just yesterday I was in Florida.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it wasn't, and it wasn't that long ago, right, that you were in Florida for Game 7.
Yeah, that's right.
Pretty exciting. But lots has happened. So, as a recap, and everybody that's watching, I'm sure already knows, but of course, we had a great free agency with Arvidsson and Skinner. We lost a couple of players, which at the time didn't seem like losses, and Desharnais and Fogle, and we had some pickups that seemed really great, and everything was swimming along. And then we got the Stan Bowman news, and just like the 80% of people that don't think I know anything about hockey, there's probably 50-50 that think that Stan Bowman was a great hire for various different reasons. And And you know, I mean, if the Oilers are good at anything, it's controversy, right? As it seems in the last couple seasons. So there was that, and not long into Stan Bowman's tenure as GM, he's faced with his biggest. I don't know if you'd call it a crisis situation, because I don't think these are necessarily win now players, but it's a big deal as far as the future depth of the Oilers go. We've got 2 offer sheets on the table. Most of you know, and I'll just reiterate what they are right now. It's, you know, there's 2 offer sheets, both from the St. Louis Blues and Doug Armstrong, both very well timed, both equal to pretty much all the money the Oilers don't have. So Broberg is $4.5 million in 2 years, per year, annually, 2 years. And then Holloway's what, about 2.25, I think, is what his was.
An approximation, yep.
Yeah, approximation. And again, 2 years. If the Oilers agree to match those offers, they cannot trade either player for a year. And if they don't match them and they go to the St. Louis Blues, the Oilers get really nothing. A 2nd-round pick for Broberg and a 3rd-round pick for Holloway. Both were 1st-round players, obviously. Yeah, so, you know, I guess let's start there. I mean, what's your thought? Like, start with, let me know here. What do you think about first off, about Doug Armstrong doing this? And I was listening to our friends over at Let's Go Blues Radio. But by the way, Bob the goalie says, I'm here for the McDavid wedding gossip. I was listening to our friends over at Let's Go Blues Radio last night. Of course, you know, I've spent time on their program a number of times. They've been on Oilerslive, great bunch of guys. They're in that camp of outside of Edmonton NHL fans that think Stan Bowman should be kicked to the curb. So there's no love lost in terms of, hey, we pissed off Stan Bowman. But they're also really excited about Phillip Broberg. Maybe not excited about Holloway, but they think they've got a player in Phillip Broberg. So start, though, on the GM side. What do you think about Armstrong's move to sign these guys to offer sheets?
It's certainly a shrewd move. Like, I mean, it's within the rules of the CBA, so they can't fault him for that. But like, it's definitely a predatory move. Now, I mean, this is professional sports. We got to remember, right? Like, these guys aren't out to do each other's favors. The Oilers just lost in Game 7 of the Cup Finals. They're looking like they're going to be a contender once again. So the Blues, as a Western Conference rival, they're well within their rights to try to do something to hurt us, and that's what they've done here. So they've put the Oilers in a really difficult spot financially, and yeah, it was just kind of the perfect storm. The longer that these contracts went unsigned, the higher the risk was, and Armstrong pounced. So I mean, good on him for doing it. It's a shrewd business move, but as an Oilers fan, and I'm sure the Oilers organization is with me on this, it's really frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it is really frustrating. What do you take of there was a little hint when listening to the Blues fans yesterday that some of this was a shot at Stan Bowman rather than, I shouldn't say it. I mean, they want Broberg and they want Holloway. There's no doubt. And they're in a different cap situation than the Oilers are right now. So this is, you know, there were a lot of things at play for this. But do you think, as has been even talked about outside of them, that had this been Ken Holland, this wouldn't have happened?
I mean, there might be a little bit of merit to that. I'm not sure. Like, we know that Doug Armstrong and Ken Holland are golfing buddies, so they have a relationship outside of a professional relationship. Holland just left the Oilers. Now Jackson says the working relationship between he and Holland was all peachy keen last year. I'm not 100% certain if that's the case or not. I feel like the Knobloch hiring was a Jackson hiring, not a Holland hiring. And I mean, Jackson, within a week or two of coming on the job, the first move he did was firing Tyler Wright, who had been Holland's guy for a number of years, going back to Detroit. Right. Yep. So Jackson wasn't exactly thinking of Holland's feelings at all during the last year of their working relationship. So it's hard to say. So maybe Holland and Armstrong did a little gossiping, and Armstrong decided to spite the Oilers. Maybe Armstrong had a bit of a beef with Bowman from all the years they were in the Central Division together, and Bowman's Blackhawks were winning Stanley Cups. And it's possible that, I mean, hey, Peter Chiarelli's with the Blues as well. Former Oilers GM. It didn't end well there. Maybe there's still a little bit of hate there. Either way, I don't think the Blues minded that the Oilers were the team that they got to pounce on for this opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely think that's probably part of it. I would suggest too that maybe it's less about Stan Bowman, more about Ken Holland, right? Or that it isn't Ken Holland, right? That this happened. You recently put an article out on heavyhockey.com about Phillip Broberg. Maybe give us a bit of an idea of some of the things you saw. I guess what my opinion, if it matters to any of you, is frankly, let them both walk. And we have the Heavy Hockey group chat, which can get heated at times. I certainly let it known within the group chat that I'm happy with seeing them both go. I mean, there's nobody that's argued that $4.5 million for Broberg's pedigree of work and that is overpay. Nobody's arguing that. But the argument would be, is he, worth the futures that is, right? Is it worth matching? And I think that, that this is that there's just not that future there for Phillip Broberg. Now, you've argued on the side of, we want the prospects and we want the futures. And I believe, unless if you've changed your tune, or maybe I misread you, but I believe you think we should match the offer. And then the argument for also keeping Broberg is he played one hell of a 10-game stretch of hockey in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then you go on to say that the underlying numbers actually weren't that great. So, I mean, let's have it. I guess my feeling is he's not going to be the player. He's not going to be a $4.5 million player even 3 years from now, let alone this year. And we could do a lot with that money at some point. And we also have Bouchard and Draisaitl that are definitely coming up. What's your thinking on that? I mean, I'm kind of curious, like, if the underlying numbers aren't great, and you're looking at this as a, futures thing. I mean, is he that good? Is he $4.5 million good? Like, or
so there's a couple different ways that we could frame this argument.
Yeah.
I mean, one way would be kind of where you're coming from. $4.5 million is way too much money for this player with his body of work in the league thus far. And we're entering Broberg's draft plus 6 season, and he's just now grabbing a hold of an NHL spot, right? It's like guys.
Yeah, and I don't think we argue about that, right? Like nobody. Yeah. There's nobody in this world that thinks he's worth $4.5 million tomorrow.
For sure, 100%. Yeah. But where I'm going with that is like guys that enter the league in their draft plus 6 year, and like that's when they're grabbing an NHL spot. It's not very often that they become top 4 defenders. Like last year, I did a piece where I was comparing Broberg's development to other Swedish defensemen that have been drafted in the first round in the salary cap era, basically. There are only 2 of them that became top 4 defensemen when grabbing a roster spot in their draft plus 5 year or later. And those were Adam Larsson and Oscar Klefbom. I mean, Larsson was a weird one. He was 4th overall pick 2011. It's just that, and he played 65 games in his rookie year, but there was a coaching change in New Jersey and he fell out of favor with the new coach, was a healthy scratch and saw AHL time and is beyond his first year. So that there was a tumultuous few years there for Larsson in New Jersey. So that's why he took so long to grab a spot. And then Klefbom, yeah, he was slowed down by injuries, but he had a real clear pathway to a top 4 spot on Oilers team that was just chronically terrible, right? This is the decade of darkness Oilers where Klefbom grabbed a spot. So like Broberg hasn't had that same luxury. He's been developing as the team has been turning into an elite championship contender. He's been blocked by depth on so many occasions, whether it's Brett Kulak coming in or Ryan Murray getting signed and the team choosing to keep Marcus Niemelainen after what I thought Broberg was better than Niemelainen in 2022, the fall in the camp of 2022. I thought that was a mistake. Then Murray gets hurt after 13 games. Broberg got hurt in the kitchen that fall, and then he ended up missing a bunch of times. So Niemelainen got games. It's just been a myriad of unfortunate situations for Broberg. Like I think he's better than what his NHL body of work has shown, but we haven't seen that yet, right? Like you referenced his 10-game stint in the playoffs, and he was on the ice for less goals against at 5-on-5 than any other Oilers defender at 2. But and again, he outscored the Panthers 4-2 in that series. It was 6-2 overall if you go back to Game 4 of the Western Conference Final. But he had a 30.21 expected goals for differential. Right? Like that just doesn't cut it. He was playing on a second pairing with Nurse. I don't think that's a good pairing. Like I don't think that's a good game plan for Broberg. But yeah, so I think there's a little bit of typically I think most times you'd be right in saying that this player is not likely to be a top 4 defenseman. But I think that Broberg has the tools to potentially defy those odds. I think his skating is brilliant. His edge work is fantastic. I think he's just had the offensive creativity coached out of him a little bit in his Oilers career so far. And I know he's got more in the tank there. Some of the plays that he made in the playoffs show me he got 3 points in 10 games, 0.33 points per game is pretty solid for a kid that's coming in with very little experience. Right. So I think there is more upside there. If you look at his 2022-2023 season, you look at Dangerous Fenwick 4 on puck IQ, he was above 60% against mid-level and low-level competitions. That's what he'd be getting as a third pairing guy. At that rate, you could argue third pairing would be too easy for him, right? Yeah. But like I say, the odds say that he's probably not going to be a top 4 D.
And and that's part of the challenge. There's a lot of challenges I see with this player in my, personal opinion, is we look at this guy, we've seen a very limited body of work in the NHL. I talked about it yesterday. I know we had a little bit of an argument, but his durability is definitely in question. He's never played more than 61 regular season games in his lifetime. I know he's only 23, but that goes back to whenever, right? He's just never, because he continues to get injured. I think it's plays like, the Bennett hit during the playoffs where he's got his head down. He reminds me a little bit of the Taylor Hall syndrome, where he ends up taking big hits because he just doesn't have the sense to get out of it. Right. And that's, guys like that sometimes, and Taylor Hall's a prime example, rarely play a full season. Right. Is he ever going to be worth, $4.5 million and play 60 games a season? And then in those 60 games, is he going to be, exactly what, people think he is, right? When listening to our friends over at Let's Go Blues Radio, they've got some of those guys had him fighting for top pairing at some point. I just think if you take him plus 15 minutes a game, right? Which we see with a lot of players that have durability issues as they get more responsibility. Go figure, but that's when they also get hurt and injured a little bit more. We'll see. I mean, that's just again, it's speculation. It's a gamble either way, really, for the Oilers. They've got to. I mean, who cares about the Blues? And I'm not pissed off at the Blues at all. Smart move if they like the player, right? And they've got the cap space. Do it. It's giving us something to talk about. But I wouldn't gamble $4.5 million on a guy that I don't know if he didn't make the team last year out of training camp, right? And then B, will he even be able to play a full season? And C, like, is he good? We don't really know. There's lots of guys that shine in the AHL, and don't shine in the NHL. Right.
Well, so I would challenge you on the point that, I mean, he did make the team out of training camp. It was just as the 7D. And he's another stroke of misfortune for Broberg is that a former 7th round pick, Vinny Desharnais, ended up playing his way onto the roster at that time while Broberg is developing, right? I mean, Broberg's got to earn his spot.
Call it what it is. He didn't earn his spot on the team. He didn't play. He played 12 games in the regular season,
12 games, and 10 of those games were before the magical day of November 24th, 2023, that game in Washington when the Oilers turned their season around. Like 10 of those games were when the team was playing like absolute horse manure.
So, right? and here's the other side to this is, the Oilers don't, like, there's a lot of folks out there freaking out that the Oilers need Broberg to complete the D. Let's be real. This Oilers team had enough D to get them to the playoffs, and they just need enough D to get them to the deadline, right? I'm not going to blow smoke up anybody's ass and tell you that our defense is the prime D in the league, right? But they're good enough. Right. And they need to be good enough to get to the deadline. At the deadline, lots of things happen.
I mean, you never know what's going to happen at the deadline, but we also shouldn't be relying on the deadline. Like, you build your team in the summer.
Right? Yeah. But I mean, you don't even know what you don't know until then. Right.
Yep. 100%.
Like, CC could. There's folks that think CC is going to have a bounce back year, and he could. Right.
And he could also be traded.
Right? And he could be traded. He could be traded before the season starts. We'll see. So anyway, I mean, long story short, I don't think Broberg and Holloway are the difference between Stanley Cup or not this year for the Oilers.
No, but I mean,
I know you're talking about futures. Before you get into it, I'll let you get your words in.
Yeah.
Here. I know you're talking about futures. But it's funny, we're talking about the St. Louis Blues, and nobody understands it as much as they do. Nobody will understand it as much as Florida Panthers fans do right now. But you need to win that Stanley Cup. You win it 1 year, and then you've got another 10 years banked up before your fans get pissed off again, right? And honestly, that's what I want. I want one damn Stanley Cup in the McDavid era, right? And it better be in the next couple of years. And after that, if the Oilers suck and rebuild for 4 or 5 years, I don't want it to be too long, then I'm fine with that. Right?
Here's my question to you, though, Michael.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Let's say the Oilers make the deal, the move that is short-term focused. We're winning Stanley Cup this year. That is their motto. That's their mindset. Okay. What happens if they don't win the Stanley Cup this year?
Well, they've incredibly failed, right? Like, I think everybody, like right now, as it has been for the last couple of years, it's Stanley Cup or bust. They've got to win it. If they're not even close this year, then we've got other challenges, right? Like they're not.
Yeah. There's a lot of issues that could happen if they don't win the Stanley Cup this year. They've assembled a Stanley Cup championship quality roster, but there's no guarantees that it's going to win. If you give up Broberg and Holloway, they could win the Cup, but they could also lose it. And the same goes if you keep them, right? They could win the Cup with Broberg and Holloway, but my thought process has always been the same as Ken Holland's was when he got here. It's not about one Stanley Cup. It's about multiple Stanley Cups. How do you keep the team competitive for as long as you possibly can, especially at a time when we're trying to re-sign Draisaitl and McDavid to long extensions? If that's what we're planning for, then how do you keep the team competitive throughout the next 10 years?
See, I love the idea of having Draisaitl and McDavid long term for the Oilers, retire. But look, I don't want to be the Leafs either, right? Like, I don't need to, I don't need these guys. Honestly, I don't care. They need to, in my world, they need to win one cup. If they win multiple, gravy, right? That's all gravy. But in my world, they need to win a cup. The next couple of years, I'll be happy. Then I'll give them a break. They can at least be competitive. Let's hope, for 4 or 5 years, rebuild, whatever. But I also don't want them to be the Toronto Maple Leafs, where they're constantly paying these players, great players, no cup. Pittsburgh Penguins in the same boat, mind you. They had multiple, but they've got Malkin and Crosby. Hey, great. Right? Like, you get to keep those guys and watch them. As a Penguins fan, I'm all right with that because I won a couple cups, right?
Yeah.
That's what I care about with the Oilers. And so they need to do it now. And if that means giving up on Broberg, then I'm all right with that.
But like right now, they can have their cake and eat it too in that regard, right? Like, you can keep Broberg and Holloway and still win a cup. But my point is, there's no guarantees that they're going to win a cup right now, right? Like,
no, there's never any guarantee.
There's never guarantee, right? So you can do all the short-term moves, do whatever you want.
Trade them.
There's no guarantee you're going to win, right? So you need to do whatever you can. Like, something Ken Holland also always said is like, you just got to get yourself to the dance as many times as you possibly can. Give yourself as many chances as you possibly can to win, right?
Ken Holland left.
I don't want to put all my
Edmonton
eggs in one
without a
basket
cup,
here,
right?
What's that?
Ken Holland left Edmonton without a cup.
Yeah, and that's true, but like, I'm just using his words here, right?
Yeah, no,
obviously it didn't work out the way he wanted it
back at you. I'm just having some fun and throwing it back at you.
But I mean, just the way I think about things is like, I'm not just thinking like, I want to win now. Don't get me wrong. Like, I would love to see the Oilers win the next 5 Stanley Cups consecutively, right? But in order to be competitive for as long as the Penguins were, as the Blackhawks were, you need to have prospects coming through the system. You need to have contributions from young players.
But what do you want? Like, those types of teams don't come along all the time, right? Like the Tampa Bay is
another example,
right? Like, there's, that's those teams are few and far between. And I mean, let's like, do you care? Like, you just want that one cup, don't you? I mean, like, you just want one cup, one celebration, isn't it? Isn't that what you need and want? Like, there's 32 teams in the league, right? And if you get your fair share, that means you win once every 32 years. If you win a couple times in 32 years, it's a success, isn't it? We need one. Like, I
agree with you on that.
Yeah, like, let's start there and let's not worry about the future. When I see this, and to take this all back to the Broberg thing, and let's I'll give you last say on that, but let's switch to Holloway right after this. When I see this Broberg thing, I see a $4.5 million contract, right? That puts a little bit of a dent in your ability to sign Bouchard and Draisaitl, right? And also handcuffs you for the season. If Broberg turns out to be nothing, you can't get rid of him. You're stuck with him this year, right? Like, you're stuck with Broberg for the rest of the season. At $4.5 million. And depending on, does Kane stay out all year? Like, everybody's counting on Kane being out with LTIR all season and doing a Vegas style comeback in the playoffs. That's like pure speculation, right? So anyway, I don't know. That's kind of my thinking on it. This bugs me. Look, I'm a Broberg fan. I know I don't sound it right now. I'm a Broberg fan. I'm not a fan of a guy in his situation. 23 NHL games last year, including 10 in the playoffs, getting paid $4.5 million and handcuffing us at the trade deadline because we can't move him. We have to move somebody else. If we're making a move at the deadline if we're in there, right? We're making a move. That's a handcuff deal. I'm not a fan of that. And that's where I'm going to end it. I'll give you last word on the Broberg thing.
So I spent most of the day today evaluating things from a financial perspective for the Oilers, not only this year, but next year as well. So I get your concern about signing Leon and Bouchard next summer. I mean, it's valid. If you keep Broberg, it does make it more difficult to do that, but there are ways around it. There are definitely ways around it. Vander Kane is one, right? I think there's a more than 50% chance that Kane has played his last game as an Oiler today already.
Yeah, you might be right. Absolutely.
If Kane's on the LTIR all year, which may very well be the case, because if you keep either one of Holloway or Broberg or both, you're going to have to move a player out to be able to activate Kane off the LTIR at some point during the year. I've done the math on it. It all checks out. If we let them both walk, there's no issues. We can throw Kane on LTIR and we'll be able to reactivate him, assuming we don't add anybody big. No problems, right? But as soon as you keep Holloway, it's close, but you do have to trade somebody away. It would have to be Janmark at a minimum from the forward side.
Okay.
If you keep Broberg and try to get Kane activated again, it's going to be CC plus something, because if you move CC, you got to have a body to replace him. That costs money, right? So that's just the way it is. But for 2025-26, you can move Kulak. Him and Broberg would be taking the same place on the roster, third pairing, left pairing D. And quite frankly, I see their skill sets as being very similar. Kulak has a little bit more polish and he's more proven, but Broberg has a lot more offensive upside than what Kulak has. So I think you could get away with doing that. And the other move would be buying out Evander Kane next summer. He would cost 1.1 on the cap for next summer. So that'd be a little over $4 million of savings. So there's ways around it if you really want to keep Broberg, which the big question you got to ask though, who has a better chance of being a top 4 defenseman in 2026-27, the first year of Connor McDavid's new contract? Is it going to be Ekholm or Broberg? Ekholm's going to be 36. The list of guys who are top 4 in the NHL at 36 is short, and they're all elite number 1 defensemen at some point in their career. Ekholm has never been that, nor is he that now.
Yeah. I mean, you're thinking 2 years down the road, though.
You have to.
And well, I mean, you do if you think that Broberg's going to move the needle that much 2 years down the road.
And that's the decision. That's the decision.
Yeah,
right?
He's not. He's just not. You said so yourself earlier. I mean, the odds of him being even a top 4 guy might be pretty slim.
He would have to defy odds to make that jump. I think he has the skill set to defy those odds, but there are odds to be defied. I'll say that.
I mean, he's in the top half of the league for defensemen in terms of pay at $4.5 million. Is he not?
79th. He'll be 79th.
Yeah.
So he'd be a high-end number 3 at that salary.
Yeah, it just and don't forget that at the end of that that's the qualifying offer. Right? 2 years from now, that's the so you're going to have to qualify him at 4.4. I think that's what it would be, or 4.2 is I'll have to look it up. But the qualifying offer for Broberg at the end of these 2 years is around 4.2 to, I think is what it is. And
And I
so
mean,
if he is not a top 4 at that point, at that same time when you want to sign Connor McDavid, you're probably going to lose him for nothing anyway.
yeah, that's a fair concern. It's Pulley RV all over again, right?
Yeah.
We're up in the CU. We lost
don't need anymore Pulley RV. We don't need it. I say, let him go. Take the pick. Use it to turn around either compensation for taking on one of the other contracts that we've talked about, CC or Kulak at the deadline. Don't handcuff yourself in the year. Use that money next year towards Bouchard and to Draisaitl. Find other uses for that money. I mean, we're going to have to find a top 4 D man anyway over the next couple of years, right? Like that's a given. Whether even with or without Broberg, the Oilers have some work cut out in order to. We know the cupboards are dry when it comes to D men. And who's our next up? Bo Akey? Is that?
Yeah, he's on the right side.
Yeah,
right. Left side, there's nobody.
Which
so,
is
like,
crazy.
It's going to be an external ad if it's not Broberg.
When you think about the Oilers, not having left D, it seems a little bit odd. But Bo Akey is the next one. Next one up, Max Wanner.
Righty.
Yeah. So anyway, end of the day, like there's work to be done in that regard. $4.5 million. I've had some now. I mean, we've all had some time to think about it. I said you'd get the last word, and then I just bud right in there and say, hey, what my gut tells me that the Oilers are going to let Broberg walk and they're going to take Holloway, match Holloway's offer. What do you think is going to happen?
That's why I'm writing all these articles that I'm writing right now. I'm trying to form a somewhat coherent opinion on this with all the information. But I kind of agree with you, to be honest. Like, as much as I love Broberg, like I think.
Yeah, I mean, whether you'd sign him or not, whether you'd match him or not, doesn't really matter.
Exactly. Right. Like I feel like the Oilers are probably going to let him walk just because of what you're saying. Like I feel like they're going to take your mindset more than my mindset, and especially given the odds of Broberg becoming a top 4D. Like I said, there's odds to defy. Right. It's not a sure thing that he's going to be a top 4D. And we got Bouchard and Draisaitl next summer. It's not impossible, but it makes it more difficult with Broberg on the books.
Yeah.
So, and the other part of this is the Oilers don't have a first or second round pick in 2025, right?
Yeah.
So if they add a second round pick for Broberg right now, that would certainly help their cause at the 2025 trade deadline. Or use that pick and bolster your prospect covered. Either way, that second round pick is not a bad asset.
Yeah, and they certainly need some of those assets back. I mean that's so we kind of agree that that's likely. I think the challenge now. Let's switch gears to Holloway. Because we've exhausted our arguments.
Poor Shannon's been waiting all show for us to talk about Holloway.
I know. And if we go back in the chat, Shannon, thanks for listening, Shannon. Shannon's a Nova Scotia boy as well. He's a beauty. He's been listening for a long time. Appreciate you, Shannon. But Shannon says, "Are we keeping Holloway? That's all I'm concerned about." And here's where I think it's again an overpay, right? Like that's what happens with offer sheets. Now my argument on the Dylan Holloway piece is it's a number of things. One is without Holloway we're losing out on speed, right? Which while I loved what Jackson was able to accomplish in the offseason, we also gave up some speed with letting Fogle go and with letting McLeod go. And so now we're sitting there. We've got Skinner and Arvidsson in there, and it's hard to believe we'd say this team lacks speed when you've got Connor McDavid on it. But you need a guy. I think you need a guy like Holloway, and I like Holloway's game. I like it more than I liked McLeod's game, and I think they actually bring some of the same things to the table. Except I think Holloway does it better, and those things are speed for one, and the ability to move up and down the lineup. But the other thing that I think Holloway brings that McLeod doesn't bring is a little bit more respect from the coaches, right? Like I think McLeod always had the ability to go up and down the lineup, but they didn't utilize him that way. Because I don't think he had the respect from the coaching staff at any time when he was in the Oilers organization. They did move him up and down a little bit, but not as much as I would have liked to see. And that's because, as everybody used to say about him, he'd play perimeter for half the season. And then when he decided he wanted to get dirty, he'd do that. Whereas Holloway is more of a speedy, almost like a Yamo type of player, right? That gets into the corners, does all the things that he does. He just needs some. He just needs to improve on his game. But I think it's 2.29. It's I think it's an overpay. I'm happy with it though because the qualifying offer I think is reasonable when you get down there, and I like the speed. Thoughts on Holloway?
Yeah, I mean, you're bang on with pretty much all of that. If I'm comparing him to McLeod, I'd say McLeod had Woodcroft's respect. They grew up in Bakersfield together, and but McLeod, he was a better defender than what Holloway is, right? And McLeod's playing center ice. Yeah, always had good underlying metrics. And so I think they liked him at that third line center spot. It's just that Holloway is way more physical than McLeod was. Like Holloway was second in the entire league in hits in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Second in the league, right? It's like obviously games played is a factor in there. He may not be second in the league in the regular season, but Holloway is physical. He will get in on the forecheck. And you're totally right. The Oilers forward group is old. It is old right now. We're still one of the oldest teams in the league. And you added Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner, both of whom are over 30. Right? Nuge is over 30. Hyman's over 30. Right? It's like a lot of our top guys are older and slower. And and the same ideas with Broberg, left wing. There's not a lot behind Holloway right now. Like we got Robbie Yarventi, who's new. I don't know a lot about him yet. Spencer Pomodi, shout out to him. He did a great piece on Yarventi recently. I think it came out yesterday. So if you're on heavyhockey.com, give that a look. But he would be the one that's next up on the left side behind Holloway, and we don't know what he's going to be yet. And Pomodi seems to think that he's going to be like third, fourth liner at most. So, I mean, it would be really hard to lose Holloway. Like you need his speed, we need his youth, and the cap hit. While yes, it is an overpay for right now, I don't think it's one that's going to hamstring us like the Broberg will eventually do.
Yeah. So I think now. What if it's an if conversation, like one or the other conversation, and you could take Broberg? Would you still side with Broberg only? Like, would you, if the Oilers are only going to match one, if that's the conversation they're having today, and Broberg is an option, would you take Broberg instead of Holloway?
I mean, I probably would, just because top 4D are so much harder to find than bottom, middle six left wingers. Like wingers are so much more plentiful. Like there's a guy in Toronto right now, Nick Robertson, left winger, same sort of idea as Holloway, has had trouble breaking into the lineup, not necessarily because he's not good enough. It's just he's been blocked. and he's asked for a trade. Right?
Yeah.
So he's a similar profile to what Holloway is, maybe not as high of a draft pick, but speedy left winger, good on the forecheck. It might give you a little bit of production in your middle six. It could be had for a lot cheaper than Holloway as well. So that's just one example off the top of my head. I think it's going to be easier to replace Holloway than it will be to replace Broberg.
I think the interesting thing, though, about D is you don't know what you don't know. Right, like you could have a guy in the organization already. It could be Bo Akey for all we know. Like it could be, a Vincent Desharnais, right? Do you know what I mean? Like they just, they're just different, right? And they mature differently as players. They, come up later. They take a little while to season, more so than top forwards do. Look, it's hard. There's no doubt. It's hard to find top 4D. You're not wrong about that. But it would be this case either way with Broberg, I think, right? If you kept Broberg, we'd still be looking for top 4D. And so, that should be.
It's really like, do you think the player is worth taking a look at for the next 2 years? Because there's a way to do it. Money aside, like we can LTI Arcane, and there's guys we can move if need be. Like, there's a way to do it. So if you want to take a look at the player, then you do it. Right?
I just don't at $4.5 million. If I'm making a decision, just a heads up to those watching the Robbie Yerventi scouting report by Heavy Hockey on Spencer Pomodi. I put the link in the chat, and then I QR code on the video if you're watching on the video right now, so you can have a read of that. Okay. I mean, this is good. I think. Look, like I get what you're saying, right? And it's either way, it's a gamble, right? Like you don't take Broberg. At 4.5, and you gamble that you can't find anybody to replace him 2 seasons from now, right?
Yeah. The risk you take by keeping him is losing him for nothing.
Yeah.
That's the risk you take. Right.
Yeah.
Right now you're losing him for a second, which honestly isn't that bad for a first rounder that's taken a long time to develop.
Now, what about this here? Rye guy on YouTube says, I'd consider Broberg if he didn't ask for a trade already, which we know he did. That's confirmed, and refused to have contract talks during the season last year. I don't know about that last part. I haven't heard that. I did hear that Holland was instructed to sign them to an extension, both him and Holloway, and it didn't happen. Whether there was a refusal piece to that, I don't know.
Yeah, Elliot Friedman did a surprise podcast on Wednesday, so the day after all that came out, and he said that Broberg's agent was saying that the idea was to always punt the contract negotiations into this summer. Okay. So, while Holland was instructed to get it done, Broberg's camp didn't want to get it done. So it's not really Holland's fault. It's more the player in that case. And I mean, Rye guy, I think that's a fair point, right? But it's an old. I mean, Jackson was here last year, but Bowman wasn't, so it's a half new management group. That's another reason why my gut is telling me they'll probably let Broberg walk. The last 10 games of the playoffs may have changed their minds. Like maybe Knobloch comes in and heaps a bunch of praise on him and pleads with them to let Broberg stay. But it's a lot of money for a guy that with Broberg's body of work who's already asked for a trade. I get that. I fully understand that perspective.
Yeah. Bob the goalie. I think I've heard of this guy. Does the addition of Savoy make the potential loss of Holloway a little less impactful? Normally, I mean, he doesn't have great questions, but we'll give him this one here. This is not a bad question. Good on you, Bob. Thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I'd say the keywords are a little less. Savoy is a right-hand shot They're going to use him at center in Bakersfield, and he's likely going to be a right winger in the NHL. Holloway's a lefty. Savoy has top 6 potential. Like, he's got top 6 written all over him. Holloway, I see as a middle 6 guy, like third line winger predominantly, but can moonlight in the top 6. He can make a cameo appearance on Draisaitl's line and be okay. I just don't see that as his permanent spot. And so I think we're comparing apples and oranges there, but it's just Holloway is more specifically on the left side. That it's like, I think that's why it's going to hurt, and that's why I don't think Savoy is going to really impact that feeling of loss.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair statement. I part of me, I wonder, right? Like the again, back to, you don't know what you don't know, right? I mean, we every year come training camp, somebody seems to shine. If it's not Holloway, somebody else steps up, right? Like that's the case. I mean, who's the next Tyrati, right?
It's been Dylan Holloway the last 2 games.
Yeah, it's been Dylan Holloway. Yeah. I mean, there are some interesting players, right, in the Oilers system that have the potential to be bottom 6 forwards, right? Which is the role Holloway's likely to play on this team. Although that changes too, right? Like we look at a team and we have the depth chart down, how it's fluid throughout the year.
Yep.
Guys go, we're expecting a lot from Arvidsson and Skinner, and Arvidsson, is still, while I think it was great, I think it's still a big question mark, right? Whether he, regains his level of play. We're going to find out soon enough. I mean, Connor Brown could be outstanding this coming season.
I hope so.
Yeah, like he could be the guy that is. I mean, if he plays anywhere close to how he did in the playoffs, I think we're going to be happy. Right? Like we're going to be.
Except this is the year that he counts for 4 point whatever it is million. It's 4.25 against the cap, because his performance bonus is counting on this year's cap, right? So I mean, last year it was fine that he struggled because he was making league minimum. This year, though, yeah, it's a $1 million contract, but that performance bonus is his money as well. So he's got some high expectations from me, high pressure.
I mean, we're asking a lot. Even from Holloway, who had moments in the playoffs where he just wasn't all that brilliant.
Yeah, and
right?
I mean, yeah, he got 5 goals, but only 2 assists, 7 points in 25 games. I think it works out to somewhere in the high 20s for points per game. If over an 82 game season, like that's 3rd, 4th liner, right? Like that's not a top 6 forward.
Dash is in the chat, says I must have missed my invite. No, you didn't. Well, you must have missed it, but you did get it.
I think you did miss the invite.
you did miss it, but you definitely did get it. It's not too late to join either. If you go, there you go. So the invite was there. And still, we'll probably do another 20 minutes or so. So you're welcome to join and give your thoughts. So we got Holloway, we've got Broberg, and then the LTIR. Let's talk about this Kane situation because we kind of briefly talked about it. News from Bob Stauffer, at least, is that it looks like Kane's going to be taking surgery and at least missing a good portion of the season, or at least starting the season on LTIR. First off, thoughts about this is has this come as any surprise to you? Is this what the rumblings were about early on? about Kane having some challenges with the organization. What's your overall feeling about this? Like, is it, you mentioned it. It could be the last we've ever seen of Kane in an Oilers uniform. You think that's a good possibility?
I mean, the more I think about it and the more I dig into it, the more I think that it's the way it's going to play out. We'll see. That it's still pretty fresh in my mind. We'll see how that aspect of it goes. But I know Kane was trying to play through it in the playoffs, and he was removed from the lineup after game 3, like before game 3. Like I was at game 3, he didn't play. Okay, so he missed. He didn't play in the last 5 games of the Cup final. He wasn't in the lineup during the massive comeback. He didn't play in Game 7. I don't think he was happy about that. If I'm a competitive player and I've been putting my body on the line for months for your organization, and then you don't let me play in the biggest games, I'm not going to be happy, right? That's just the way it is. But by all accounts, it sounds like Kane actually does want to be here, which is great. He has a no move clause, so I don't see a trade happening anytime soon. He has to submit a list of 16 teams that he would accept the trade to on March 1st, 2025. So, like for this season, he's likely an Oiler. Okay. LTIR though, I think it's a situation where they were hoping that rest and recovery and a little bit of rehab would hopefully heal the situation. Yeah, like I'm thinking back to McDavid's knee injury when he blew his knee apart, and they did the documentary about him not taking the surgery and healing it naturally. Yeah. And so I think that was kind of the idea with Kane, and there's obviously scheduling issues with like trying to find a doctor to do it, right? Everybody takes vacations in the summer. That's just the way
Kane's also not as young as McDavid was when he did that, right?
Also true, right? Yeah. So, and we don't know the specifics of his injury. It was reported as a sports hernia late in the regular season, but now everyone's saying it's a hip injury. So I don't know exactly what the injury is or how long the time frame of recovery would be after surgery. I don't know when the surgery is going to happen, but all signs point to Kane having surgery and being on the IR and being on LTIR for many months.
Yeah. Can I say something? Like this Kane thing is kind of interesting to me because until Stauffer came out with this tweet, I actually hadn't even considered Kane on the depth chart, believe it or not. Like, apologies to Kane because, Rye Guy says, he bought a house. He wants to stay. I got total respect for that. Like he wants to be in Edmonton. He clearly wants to play hockey. It's like you said, right? Like one of my beefs with Kane back when he was in his Sabres days is he just didn't look interested. Right. Like,
yeah, he looks interested now.
he seems legit interested. He seems like if, whatever was plaguing him at a personal level in the past seems to have gone away. He doesn't seem to want the limelight like he used to want. It just is. There's this whole new Evander Kane guy and persona that, look, I kind of admire now, right? Like I kind of look at it. I think, yeah, he's done some good things and he wants to play good big minutes. But I like just being open. I didn't have him in the depth chart. Like my brain sort of shut him out. And then all of a sudden, Stauffer comes out and says he's likely starting on LTIR. And I think that I just had assumed that he would. And I didn't have our team, the Oilers team, having him on the roster as they made their push, to get back to the Stanley Cup finals again this year. So it's not a big deal. The big deal is, of course, the $5 million in cap that he carries with him, right?
Yes.
and
the associated production that comes with that, or lack thereof, as we saw last year.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of room for him in the top 6.
Yeah, there isn't room for him in the top 6 anymore.
So the other challenge that I have is if there's no room for him in the top 6, how does that affect the persona, the guy that we've seems to like really want to play and gets really mad and almost pouty when he's not in the top 6. How does that change his production on the team? It can't be good. And $5 million, with the no movement clause. I don't know that. I hope that I hope he works it out. For his own sake, but I think LTIR, might be the best thing for the club and for him. Right.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate. I mean, like I have a lot of respect for Kane. Like I love his game. I think that when he's at his best, he's a really important player for the Oilers. But this season, yeah, I mean, I don't, based on what he produced with his injury last year, I don't have him in the lineup with or beyond.
Sorry, Bob.
How does this guy have a podcast?
There goes. I had his respect earlier, and then sorry.
No, it's all good. But yeah, it's just, unless Kane is 100% healthy, I don't know how having his $5 million in the lineup helps us, right? And given the cap situation we're in, and like even if we let Broberg and Holloway walk, having him out on LTIR and being able to use that space at the deadline to upgrade the roster elsewhere would be huge.
Yeah,
huge.
Oh, it would absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's so it's interesting. I'm going to be laughing about the Bob's quote there for a little bit, but and for those of you on X or another platform, Bob the goalie says, in quotes, I didn't even have Kane on my depth chart, end quotes. How does this guy have a podcast? He's one of the 80% that thinks I'm full of shit. He's always been a big supporter. And Dash somewhere in the Rocky Mountains says Kane is the perfect candidate to pull a Mark Stone. I think that's what a lot of Oilers fans are hoping for, right? And one that we've constantly been saying we need to do that, right?
I think what happens with Holloway and Broberg will be a really big indicator of how that situation will turn out. Like I say, whether it's Holloway or Broberg or both, it doesn't matter. If you want to activate Kane and have one of those two guys on your team, you're going to have to trade a player to activate Kane at some point throughout the season. Right. Yeah. So I think if either one of them are kept, even if it's just Holloway, then I think Kane stays on the LTIR all year long.
Look, okay, yeah. So Kane goes. There's a couple comments here. They need a sandpaper player like Kane. Perfect candidate to pull a Mark Stone. I think a lot of people believe Kane to be that, gritty player that is going to do, that gets in there, mucks it up a little bit. Without Kane in the lineup, what's the identity of this Oilers team?
It's just got to be well-rounded, safe, disciplined hockey. Right. Yeah. Like we can't talk about the high-flying Oilers because we just talked about how we have all these forwards that are over 30 years old. And if we lose Holloway, then we get even slower. Right. So it's not necessarily about speed, but what worked well for the Oilers last year against the Canucks, against the Stars, and against the Panthers was just not getting involved in the stuff after the whistles. Right. Keep it clean. Don't play into what the opponent wants you to do. Don't need the silly penalties and just play hockey because they play a fast enough style that they're going to win against most teams on most nights.
Yeah. I mean, the crazy thing is McDavid and Draisaitl are two young guys, right?
Yeah. Well, they're getting to their UFA years now, right?
I know. They're 27 and 28. They're a lot younger than I am. They're hardly young anymore, right?
Yeah. They're not old, but they're not young.
When I'm looking at this roster, I'm just like, wow, this is average age is over 30 on the forwards. And the only thing that pulls it below that would be Dylan Holloway if he stays.
Yep.
And then we've got Corey Perry, who we've got on the depth chart. We haven't even talked about Corey Perry, which that was maybe the one signing that I wasn't 100% sure I agreed with. Like I just. It's funny because I was always the one screaming to get Corey Perry on the Oilers year over year, and then he comes and when he re-signs, I'm like, well, but he really didn't do what I want. Like the reason I wanted Corey Perry didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, he wasn't really the worm in the playoffs.
Yeah. No, he wasn't. He wasn't the reason the Oilers made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. He has been the reason other teams have made it. Or a part of the reasons, at least. But in my mind, he was he wasn't a big part of the Oilers making it to the Stanley Cup Finals. He became a great trivia piece as to how many times he's made it to the finals without winning.
Yeah, what did he get?
Like
2 goals.
Yeah, and now he's 39.
Yeah. And here's the kicker, though. Yeah. Here's the thing that really impacts it for this year. So Perry does have he could earn up to $250K in performance bonuses. Now, talking about LTIR with Kane, there's a little known rule where there's a performance bonus pool when you put a player on LTIR. So you want to have any players on your roster that have performance bonuses on your roster on the day that you put somebody on LTIR, because if he isn't and he's on your roster later in the year, then his performance bonus gets tacked on to his cap hit, right? So that's why you're likely going to see Matt Savoie on the opening day roster if Kane goes on LTIR. Well, when? Because I think that's 99% certain.
Yeah.
But that means Perry is locked into the roster as well because he has a performance bonus as well. Right. So like that 1.15 million, that actually complicates things a little bit if we were trying to keep Broberg and Holloway for this season. Right. So it's not going to be the thing that kills us, but it's certainly another little complication having Perry signed at the value he signed at.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it doesn't kill us. And he's not, he's a bottom 6 forward.
He's a locker room presence at this point.
Exactly. Yeah. It was disappointing. Like it was, now look, whatever happened to Corey Perry changed his world. Right. And, I did have a little bit of this concern. I'm not sure anybody knows outside of whatever, the inner circle of folks that it happened with. Despite all the speculation. But we do know that he, whatever it was, included some substance abuse of some kind and also changed sort of his outlook. And he was definitely, at least from my vantage point, seemingly pretty forlorn when it all came about, begging for forgiveness from whoever was involved, or sad that he brought that upon them. And so all of that being said, this is coming from me who knows about giving up addictions and that. I can tell you that first year of your life after you've given that up is maybe one of the toughest years of your life to learn how to operate in everything, right? And when you're playing NHL hockey, that kind of distraction, mental distraction, is going to have some effect on your game, right? And all of the things that we loved about or hated about Corey Perry were all things that he was capable of doing while he was active in whatever addictions he had.
Right.
Okay. You take that away and he, is a different person. He may not be as capable anymore of doing those things, at least for that first year. right? Until he learns to live life without whatever crutch he's got. Okay. And so I'll give him that. Like if as long as he's staying sober or free from whatever substances he abuses, and he's learning how to live his life without that crutch and that abuse piece, then he might come back to being the player that he was before. But you relearn how to live life. I can tell you that 100% from experience. You relearn how to live life. And so what I saw from Corey Perry, and like in terms of facial expressions, in terms of how he was, all of the little things that other people may or may not notice, I would say that probably had a little bit to do with it. Dash said John Scott talked publicly about what Perry did. I didn't hear that one, but it doesn't matter. I don't
hear
care
anything about it.
yeah. And I, you know what, I don't care to go figure it out. But anyway, at the end of the day, the addiction piece and being free from it takes some time for him to get back. But I still question the sanity of putting him back on the team for another year. Although now that we're in this situation where Kane might be on LTIR and we're now looking for, at least a seventh defenseman if they don't match the Broberg offer, then, this Corey Perry signing is not so bad. He's a depth player, right? Okay. Enough about Corey Perry. What's your thoughts in terms of if the Oilers don't sign or don't match Broberg? Like the options right now are Klingberg, Barry. Somebody mentioned Schultz.
Yeah, Schultz is out there.
Schultz is out there. Who else is available?
Yeah, Shattenkirk is out there.
Shattenkirk is the one, yeah.
Like I thought Shattenkirk would be the ideal one, but then I realized that there was a time back when he was a big deal that he said publicly that he wouldn't want to play at Edmonton. So I don't think he would come here.
Did he say that? I don't remember.
This was back when he was a big deal, like when he was.
Oh yes, now I remember. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, maybe things have changed now that the Oilers are where they are, but yeah, I don't think he wants to come to Canada.
Yeah, and Klingberg's coming off an injury.
Yeah, right? I think he had hip surgery at some point in the last calendar year, so he'd be like Sam Gagner.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about Tyson Barrie?
I mean, it's a new management group ever since Barrie left. I know Barrie was sad to leave the team. I know the guys really like Barrie, but the same problem exists now as when he was on the team. He's not a good match with Nurse, although his profile, like, if Nurse needs a puck mover beside him, right? But he needs to be a better defender than what Barrie is. So that's kind of why it didn't work out with Nurse and Barrie together.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it goes back, but I seem to recall you doing an article of regarding that at one point.
I've talked about it, but I've taken some information from NHL Sid over at Oilers Nation. Like, he's done a lot of work with micro-tracking and coming up with ideal defense pairs based on stylistic stuff that he sees in numbers. And so, like, I've looked at that information closely, and yeah, like I say, Nurse needs somebody that can move the puck and that is a better rush defender than what Cody Ceci is. And I don't know that Barrie is that. So, like, and Barrie hasn't played, like, he didn't play hockey last year, right? Like, the Predators basically had him sitting on the sidelines the entire year last year. So, like, I don't know what Barrie is at this point, and, like, we got rid of him for a reason. It's like, I don't know that bringing him back is the right play. Like, if we don't sign Broberg, I'm thinking what'll happen is Kulak will probably go up to the second pairing. Oh no, CC would stay on the second pairing. I apologize, and then Troy Stetcher would come up and play with Kulak. That's probably what would happen.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things with Barry, with the potential around Barry, is, we know the players like him.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the one thing in his favor.
Yeah. Whether that, how far that goes, I don't know. But I mean, it seems, at least it seems a little bit like McDavid gets a little bit of his way, right? On occasion, he might be good enough to have a little bit of say. And so, when I think about this Tyson Barrie thing, I think like the guys sitting out there talking and, suggesting who they might, who might be available and who would consider signing. And I think Tyson Barrie has familiarity with the organization. He knows what he gets, when he comes to Edmonton, like he understands the way the fan base is. Right?
Maybe there was a little bit of recruiting going on at the royal wedding. We don't know.
That's true too. Yeah. Yeah. I know that Bob's been here for the McDavid wedding talk.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears just briefly to that. I didn't, it's funny. Of course, I was at the Olympics when Connor McDavid got married, so I wasn't paying any attention.
La-di-da.
Yeah, la-di-da. I didn't even realize it happened until the pictures came out. Who were Connor McDavid's groomsmen? I think I saw Ebbs there, right?
Oh, I didn't get that much into it. I know. I'm pretty sure Ebbs was at the wedding. I know Leon and Darnell were both groomsmen. Connor's brother Cam would have been a groomsman.
Yeah.
I don't know who the best man was. I'm just listening to guys in the wedding party here. But yeah, I don't know who else would have been in that conversation or in that little group.
I mean, I saw one picture. That was maybe the only kind of curious thing. I was thinking, like, who are the hockey players that were in his wedding party? And outside of that, I mean, hey, congratulations to Connor McDavid. I just didn't have the same. You're not really old enough to appreciate it, but didn't have the same royal wedding feel that Gretzky's wedding had.
I've seen a couple pictures. I have an idea of how big that event was.
It was huge.
Yeah.
Like massive. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, different time. Everything was a little bit different. This was, in like Connor McDavid, maybe one of the most talented players in the history of the NHL. Just from a talent level, but the one thing Gretzky will always have is he wasn't just talented on the ice; he seemed to be a talent off the ice as well, in terms of his ability to grow the game and talk to media and do all of these things, which he seemed to do so effortlessly. Connor McDavid's kind of become better at that. He's certainly got out of his robotic stage, but he's still very much way more private than Gretzky and all the Oilers used to be, for sure. So it's no big surprise.
Well, and Gretzky also married Janet Jones, who was a famous actress back then, right? So like that also played a role in the scale of the two events.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, Lauren's great and everything, but she doesn't have the same fame as Janet.
Yeah. Shannon Hain, still, we're talking about the Broberg thing. Ekholm has a lot of praise for Broberg, so to me, that's a huge statement that he should stay. Bob the goalie, he hasn't done an article on talking about you, Lotsy. You haven't done an article on TD4.
Don't think it's not coming there, Bob.
Who's this Bob the goalie guy anyway? Like, man, I tell you, we don't. TD Ford. Yeah, I mean, we haven't been we never talk about other things here on Oilers Live. It's strictly hockey. This is not Oilers Now. Right?
Right.
Yeah. Although, well, we just had a little bit of wedding talk. I mean, we've been on for an hour 20. I think we're getting close to wrapping it up. Anything left that you want to touch on before we go?
I think we've kind of touched on it as much as we can. Like, there's a lot of different angles that are being approached here. Like, there's a lot of things to consider with the Broberg and Holloway offers. I think there's a lot of good arguments for and against keeping both players or one or the other. Like, there's pros and cons to all these situations. But at the end of the day, nothing is impossible here. Like, there's a way to have it all and have it all work out nicely in the end. I've been crunching the numbers not only for next season, but for 25-26 as well. It's all possible, right? So I don't know what's going to happen here, but it's going to be real interesting to see what
is the. We're on day 2 now, right? What's the actual deadline?
It's next Tuesday. They have 7 days to offer or to match the offers.
Tuesday, is that at noon, or do we know
I don't know the exact. I don't know the exact time. Like, typically, their new day I think is 3 Eastern time. Like, that's usually when the trade deadline ends, is 3 Eastern time. So I imagine that's kind of like the cutoff for the day in the NHL world, so to speak. So maybe that number means something. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
I mean, we kind of talked about it early in the show. Are you at all pissed at the Blues for doing this? Or for you, is it just something of interest as far as hockey is concerned?
I'm annoyed at them. I'm not.
Like, would you, as a fan of the game, as a fan of the Oilers, I mean, are you in this camp of like Neighbors is our revenge offer sheet, like, coming out, or is this the
not necessarily, because
Kotkaniemi stakes again?
They gave Kotkaniemi like $6 million. Like, I'm sorry, that was a waste.
Yeah,
that was a waste. That talk about an overpay. That was an overpay. It's I don't think that we need to put ourselves in that situation just for a little bit of revenge for what happened with this situation. Like, I'm not carrying a pitchfork and a torch down to St. Louis. Like, I'm not flying there to speak with Doug Armstrong, right? Like, I'm not that mad about it. Like, it's well within the rules. It's a shrewd business move. It's professional sports. Emotions don't really matter that much. But as a fan, I'm annoyed at them. I might boo them. I mean,
the Oilers have done it
this year, right?
Right. The Oilers have sent out offer sheets in the past.
Oh yeah. Maybe this is karma for Dustin Penner and Thomas Vanek, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I look, I've got no ill will to Doug Armstrong and the Blues. In fact, if anything, I got a ton of respect, because this is, in my mind, like the coolest offer sheets I've seen in the history of the offer sheets. Like, there's
this has never been done before. Okay, like two guys at the same time on the same day. There's one other time where it happened with two guys from the same team in the same summer. That was 1991. It was Boston taking guys from St. Louis, ironically.
There you go. Maybe they're coming back now with a vengeance. I mean, it's everything about it is just shrewd by Armstrong, if he believes that strongly in Broberg, right? And not to mention, he's got the cap space to do it, right? And he's got some questions on defense.
He's thinking ahead. He's got 33-year-old Nick Leddy playing on his second pair right now, right? Leddy ain't gonna be that good forever, and I don't know what's going on with Torrey Krug, but I think he's been fighting some injury issues the last couple of years.
Krug's had injury issues. Not everybody's sold even on their second line D, Perunovich and Falk. They looked like they. This to me is what if you're. I love it. I think. I'm fine with this. Also, it gives us something to talk about, right?
It's kept my mind busy for the last couple days, and it will for the next few. So, I mean, thank you for that. I don't make my August a little more fun.
Look, I don't think this is the be all and end all for the Oilers either, right? Like, we're not talking, them offer sheeting like a Leon Draisaitl or an integral part of what's going to take the Oilers to the Stanley Cup Finals this year. We're talking about them changing the trajectory of the Oilers over the next couple seasons, right?
Yeah, 100%. This isn't going to kill us if we lose both Broberg and Holloway. Yeah, it'll suck. Like a second for Broberg, I don't think is a terrible return. I don't think it is. But a third for Holloway at this point, I think is a terrible return. So that part will sting a little bit. But like you say, it's not going to kill us. And if anything, it's going to just boost up our 25 draft a little bit and give us more ammo for the 2025 trade deadline. It's like, it's not the end of the world if we lose them both. It'll be sad. It'll be frustrating, but it won't kill us.
Yeah. No, I think we're on the same boat. I get 100% your arguments about Broberg. It's not that we just don't, we disagree on his value. Right.
Yeah. That's going to happen.
It's going to happen. I can sleep at night knowing I'm right, and it's all good that way. All right. You know what? We've been on for closing in on 90 minutes. Just want to say it's great to be back, Dash. Check your Twitter messages, man. Check your X messages. We'll get you on. Of course, we want you on here. Although this one did come up a little bit. We're not as big as Friedman, but this fits in the emergency podcast department. So it's about only a couple hours ago where I decided for sure we'd be there, be on here tonight. Great to have you, Ryan. As most people know that watch and tune in, you can read Ryan Lotsberg on heavyhockey.com. When something happens, he's an article a day kind of guy, and digs deep into the numbers quite a bit. And we're thankful to have you as part of the Heavy Hockey team. And thank you to everybody. Hope everybody's had a great summer. It's been it has been a good summer, and good to take some time off and regroup, especially given the fact that we're not that far from training camp, right?
Yeah, about a month.
Yeah, about a month. I think this time last year they were doing captain skates almost.
They've been going for 3 weeks already.
Yeah, that's right. So, although that didn't have a great effect on the beginning of the season, let's hope for a little bit more out of the gate this year, and some more excitement. As always, give the guests the last word. Although you're hardly a guest anymore, Ryan, you've been like you've been almost as regular on the show as Dash has. And
for tonight, I've at least stolen Dash's spot as executive co-host.
Right. That's right. Executive co-host to the co-host, Ryan Lotsberg. All right, sir, you get the last word, and we'll call it a night. Everybody else have a great night. Oh, one last thing. March 15th, circle it on your calendars right now, is the Heavy Hockey Showdown. It's going to be Team Heavy Hockey versus Team Edmonton Sports Talk for the second year. We're going to be in support of the Sexual Assault Center of Edmonton, as we like to do now. So put that in your calendars. Every year we try to do something a little bit bigger and better. This one, the ice is booked. We're ready to go. It should be a fun one this year. But I'll start talking about that right now. March 15th of 2025. We're a quarter of the way into the 25th or 21st century. All right. You're up, Ryan, with the last word. Don't forget to say goodnight, and I'll shut us down.
All right, sounds good. But in a piece a little while ago, I wrote that I wasn't really going to start judging Stan Bowman on his work as GM of the Oilers until after the 2025-26 season, when he really had to start with roster construction with Leon Draisaitl and Evan Bouchard and Connor McDavid. But Well, how things have changed really quickly. Now we have a real reason to judge Bowman on an important critical decision for the franchise, which are these 2 offer sheets for Broberg and Holloway. So, like I said, we've talked about it a lot in the podcast. I've written a couple pieces already this week, and I'm going to be coming out with a lot more before the deadline for the Oilers to match. I've got an article coming out tomorrow about the cap implications. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, maybe a little bit of whiskey, because you might need it for that article tomorrow. But yeah, stay tuned to my Twitter account at Lotsryan and the Heavy Hockey account at Heavy Hockey Net, heavyhockey.com. I have lots of content for you over the next few days and over the weekend. Aside from that, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and have yourselves a wonderful night.
I'm just going to say one last thing. This is the Oilers Live jingle, which we haven't heard enough of lately. My personal favorite on my playlist. Here it goes. Have a great night, everybody.
Oilers Live.